Alright, we'll do the patch rundown. The fact that she can split push and change into her ultimate farm without being when she's being damaged, that's fucking massive. Like, that's like a huge buff. Alright. Hi guys, I'm Saintvicious, and I'm going to be doing the patch 8.6 rundown. This one's a pretty decent sized patch due to the Dustblade nerf, so we're going to go right into it. So basically Dustblade got nerfed because it's a broken item, and it pretty much just like makes every single assassin in the game broken and overpowered and all that other nonsense, so it makes them very hard to balance. So they pretty much nerfed the damage by 120 on melees and 100 on range, which is quite a bit of damage in my opinion. It's going to be a big nerf to like Kha'Zix and Nocturne and all those other types of champions. So then they tweaked it a little bit. Melee basic attacks instantly kill traps and wards that are disabled by Blackout. That's nice and all, but this damage is still like pretty big. And Blackout won't be triggered if the owner is currently using a sweeping lens or oracle alteration. So that's just like if you're walking with sweeper and it won't use your Dustblade charge. That's just quality of life change in my opinion. But this is like a pretty big nerf, 120 damage at higher ranks. So I think that's definitely gonna hit a lot of people. But of course, Riot, they ended up buffing a lot of the champions. Just because of the Dustblade nerf, you know, a lot of the champions, they use Dustblade. So they raised Graves' base attack damage and his magic resist growth, and then they made Smokescreen faster, and the vision reduction now applies more quickly. Graves, like, in some builds uses a Dustblade, but not all of his builds use Dustblade. Like, there's a lot of, like, Bruiser Graves builds where you can go, like, PD Black Cleaver or something like that, and go, like, a lifesteal build. So I think instead of going the Dustblade one-shot build, you're going to see Graves going that more, like, Bruiser build. And I actually think that Graves is going to be pretty decent on the next patch coming up in certain types of team comps where you have a lot of CC. So I'd expect to see Graves into this next patch. Like, this is a pretty decent, like, 80 in MR. It's like a 9 MR buff, I think, at max rank. And then you have this, like, small 80 buff as well. So, and then also if Smokescreen is, like, a reliable form of CC, I think some of the better Graves players are going to come out and you actually see that champion, like, being a little bit more prominent in the meta. So I think it's a decent buff. Only Blue Cane used Dustblade, so this is kind of a big buff to Red Cane. You get, actually not a big buff, but there's a buff. You get 0.1 bonus AD, and then also Umbral Pass gets a buff on the Blue Cane. I think Blue Cane is like absolutely garbage in most cases, and you much rather go Red Cane. And I don't really like Cane because Cane is a feast or famine champion in solo queue, so I don't really think that this changes Cane that much, but whatever, it's still a buff, so I'll take it. Kha'Zix is pretty much Dustblade is getting nerfed because of Kha'Zix in my opinion. Like, that's the sole reason this item is getting nerfed, because Kha'Zix with R evolve is insanely broken and very hard to play around. Like, he just insta kills you and there's like nothing you can do about it. There's like no outplay. So they nerfed the base damage on Q but raised the bonus attack damage ratio and raised the isolated bonus damage. So if you're isolated, you'll get probably cucked by Kha'Zix still even without Dustblade. But it won't be like Kha'Zix jumps on you in the middle of your team and you take like 300 Dustblade damage on top of like the Kha'Zix Q. Sorry, I got hiccups, and just die instantly. So it's actually going to be a pretty big change on the Q. I think Q will be really good against isolated targets, but Kha'Zix's team fighting potential will go down a lot. And the Void Spikes also no longer deals bonus damage to minions in the jungle, or monsters in jungle, so I think that his clear speed is going to get hurt a lot, like especially Raptors and Wolves. So I think Kha'Zix is going to fall down a little bit because of this, but he can still be like viable in the meta just because of like these Q changes. But depending on how fast his W clears the jungle now, I think this is going to hurt. This is the big change to me. This is going to hurt him a lot, the W change. Misfortune, now she has attack damage growth increased by 1. I don't really think that this is to me is like a bigger buff than the Dustblade nerf to Misfortune. Like, I know Dustblade was nice on Misfortune, but I think with this you're gonna see more of like the Essence Reaver build Misfortunes and like the IE, like the crit based Misfortunes to come out, because this is a 18 attack damage buff on Misfortune. So maybe you go the crit based Misfortune build, you might see her like popping out a little bit more. So I think this is a decent buff to Misfortune. You probably see her like pop out in the meta and against certain types of champions, and if you have like good setup in your team comp. Nocturne is a champion that I think has like a super good early and mid game, but if you look at his like win rate on any of the statistics websites, his win rate drops off dramatically as the game goes on, and pretty much it just like drops like a rock, and it's really hard to close out a game on Nocturne just because the scaling on his ultimate's pretty bad, and the just the attack rate damage, the base, all that kind of stuff is pretty bad. But now his base damage is going to be increased by 50, and you also get a 0.3 bonus attack damage bonus. Nocturne was like one of the big users of Duskblade, so I think probably you won't use... I don't know, maybe you will, maybe you won't. I think maybe like some more of the Bruiser builds will be like more prominent on Nocturne now, and not the Duskblade builds. So maybe that would be like... I've actually gone like IE builds on Nocturne before, but it's really expensive. So I don't know. I have to like mess around with the builds. I think Nocturne's going to be pretty close to the same champion, but this AD ratio and base damage increase are actually pretty nice for him. It's still kind of hard to play Nocturne in the late game, and Ninja Tabbies also kind of cuck him really hard too. So I think you can play Nocturne when the enemy can't get Ninja Tabbies and they have to get Mercs on every single person. That's like the one time when Nocturne's super good to play. But I think those are like good times, and other times like he just feels really bad. Rengar is like another type of champion like that, where you can only play him when the enemy can't get Ninja Tabbies, because I think just because like all of his damage is on his Q, which is an auto attack, he just kind of get like all his damage just gets cucked by Ninja Tabbies. So I think all these little bonus attack damage ratio changes are going to be nice and all, but I think that in order to fit him into like a good team comp, it needs to be a team comp where the team can't get Ninja Tabbies. So if you are against a team that has to build Merc Treads, then I think Rengar will be like super good in my opinion with these changes. It's just like overall scaling bonus attack damage changes. Shaco is another like really big Duskblade user. Like I think one of the only reasons why Shaco is viable in the meta was because of how strong Duskblade was on his Q and stuff like that. So now they like pretty much changed Shaco's next basic attack after Deceive now deals 50 damage plus bonus attack damage. So what I think you'll start seeing more is like maybe like some crit based Shaco builds with like maybe like an IE. It's really expensive, but maybe we'll see like a Ghostblade with like a Infinity Edge or something, or maybe people still will go Duskblade. But I think this is gonna hurt Shaco a little bit. Right now he has like a really high win rate in solo queue and in platinum and above, but I think maybe with some more of the crit based builds, Shaco will be viable. Because this is actually like a decent amount of damage that they're adding onto his Q, so I think he won't be hit as hard by Duskblade nerfs as people actually think. And now on Talon was also another big Duskblade user, so they buffed his passive by quite a bit, and they also buffed the AD ratio on his ultimate by 0.2. I think Talon still has some of the same issues where he kind of falls off later in the game. These are nice buffs to him, but I think that maybe a single target explosive kind of damage will be a little rough, but I think he'll make up for it with some of the scaling. I think Talon will be pretty much the same type of champion he is now with the Duskblade nerf and then like these buffs. So he's pretty much the same type of champion. I think he's somewhat viable. Like there's some guy, I think Fui, he plays like Talon top and things like that. So I think you'll see still like Talon popping off and like roaming and things like that. Wukong got actually a pretty substantial buff in my opinion. He got a 0.8 AD ratio change on his base, and then 0.8 AD per level, and then a 0.4 total attack damage scaling on his Q. Like Duskblade was pretty good on Wukong, but I think that you don't have to go it, and I think that this buff is actually like pretty nice because this gives Wukong a lot of scaling. Like 0.4 AD is a lot. It's like there's like 150 extra attack damage or something, or extra damage on his Q when you're like maxed out on items or like pretty high end items. Then also he's getting the 0.8 base AD growth. So I think that Wukong actually got like a pretty good buff from this, despite Duskblade being nerfed. So I think that maybe you'll see Wukong a little bit more prevalent in the meta if he has a good lane matchup, because Wukong's laning is like actually pretty atrocious. And then Zed is like another champion that just gets destroyed by Ninja Tabbies. They made it to where his Q can like hit, it doesn't take reduced damage when you hit multiple targets, so that's pretty nice. And then now Deathmark also got like a 10% buff on the later rings. So these are like nice little buffs to Zed like later in the game, because that's where Zed really suffers. But I think that Zed will still pretty much be the exact same champion, and not much has changed on him. Caixa is an interesting champion from what I've seen in solo queue. It looks like her laning is just horrible because her attack range is so low, but now they buffed her attack range by 25, which is okay. It's like decent. It's still pretty low though. And then they kind of just like buffed her numbers like all down the line, like small buffs, like adding range to this, buffing the ratio on Q. It's kind of for like the Rage Blade build, in my opinion. And then they lowered the AP ratio on the W. And then the attack speed got tweaked a little bit on the E, and then but the minimum movement speed got buffed, and then the maximum movement speed got buffed as well. And then the R got tweaked a little bit as well. I think all these little quality of life changes, and especially this 25 attack range change, might actually make her a viable ADC. And I've seen a couple Caixa jungles like popping off too, so I think that once people really get to learn the kit and start to like learn how to not get punished so hard by the range, I think that Caixa will actually be a decent champion on the next patch, and I think people will be playing her. This is one of the interesting changes to me on this patch is the Lucien buffs. I think these are very big buffs to Lucien, and you could just go like, people say like he has no tracker's knife anymore, so it's impossible. The two things I've seen are you just keep your yellow trinket all game and be like very sparing on your wards, or you get Targans and then like run into the lane and like Targans people to try to get the quest item. That, I don't know, I've seen that happen too. That's like the two ways of doing it. And then so like you can get wards if you really need them. And then the passive flurry, first attack energy return, now gives 30 instead of 20, which is a pretty big buff. The second attack is going to get 15. So that's like a pretty substantial energy buff to Lucien. I like that a lot. And then Resonating Strike has 100 more range. That's pretty good as well. You can do like a lot of like more interesting ganks where like you go behind Raptors and queue the mid laner from behind the Raptors and things like that. So that'll open up some of those kinds of plays. And then this is the big buff to me is Dragon Rage at higher ranks got 150 damage buff. This is kind of just reverting the nerf. If you remember, this used to do 600 damage before they nerfed it. This is like one of the big nerfs that like actually destroyed Lee Sin. Was like, they're like, yeah, Lee Sin, your ultimate does too much damage, and they just like dropped it into the ground where he does no damage at max rank. So I think that this is gonna kind of bring Lee Sin back into like some of his old power. So I think Lee Sin will be definitely a viable jungler on the next patch, and you'll probably see him around a bit. And then Lucien's a weird champion because he's so like snowbally. So he's either like super OP and just like crapping on every lane, or he's just like bad because his attack range is so short. But they buffed his W by a little bit, and then they also tweaked the attack damage ratio on his ultimate by a little bit also. These are like pretty decent buffs in my opinion. Maybe I'm trying to think what people would build on him. Maybe they'll still go the Black Cleaver build. Maybe they'll go the Essence Reaver build. I've seen like a bunch of different builds on Lucien, but these are like pretty good scaling buffs to Lucien. So maybe you'll see a little bit more Lucien around. I remember Lucien was pretty good into Xayah before they nerfed Lucien, and Xayah is like one of the most prominent ADCs in the game right now. So maybe you'll see Lucien popping up in that kind of matchup. I think he'll be like a little bit viable. Quinn got her attack damage lowered a little bit, but the base attack damage growth got buffed. So like overall, it's going to be a buff to her attack damage. And then I read over this before, but pretty much the TLDR is that what stood out to me is now Quinn can use her ultimate, like channel it and go into her ultimate even while taking damage, and she doesn't get knocked out of her ultimate by minions. So what this means is that Quinn can just split push like all fucking day. She's gonna be like a Tryndamere type champion where she's just split pushing all day and being obnoxious as fuck and really annoying in some matchups. So I actually think these are like really big buffs to Quinn if you want to play her the split push style. And they also like did a lot of bug fixes, like you don't deal double damage when reactivating R, which was a big bug. But I think that being able to change forms while taking damage is actually a really big buff to Quinn, and I think that you're probably going to see her. I think you'll definitely see some Quinn in certain matchups. Like if somebody tries to pick Gangplank, I wouldn't be surprised to see Quinn. Like people pick Lucien into Gangplank, I think it'll be Quinn now instead. Alright, we got Recon AP ratio buff, that does nothing. W AP ratio buff, got nothing. In Battle Dance, E range 100, pretty good. And they nerfed, you know, a little bit on the Xayah range, which is that doesn't really do anything. So this is a pretty good buff to Recon when he's not with Xayah, because his win rate when he's with Xayah is like really kind of like whatever, but when he is with Xayah, it's like pretty high. I think this changes actually do literally nothing to Recon, though. He's exactly the same champion. So Deadly Plumage. While Deadly Plumage is active on both Xayah and Recon, when one of them basic attacks an enemy, only their own Deadly Plumage strikes that enemy. Oh, that sucks. this is gonna hurt the level 1 all-in ability, because like everybody knows like you go against Recon like W's you and then they just like run you down the lane like fucking baboons and like throwing feces feathers at you and you just die. So this is gonna nerf this a little bit on the level 1 all-in, but I think they'll still be overall a very strong lane. They brought back Shurelia's Reverie. Grants user and nearby enemies plus 40% movement speed. Wowzers. And also gives you movement speed and CDR. This could be a good item on like Alistar. I think this will replace Righteous Glory on Alistar for the people who want to use that. Oh, it actually gives ability power too. That's interesting. So it'll replace like some of these engagers types of items. Maybe this will even be good on some top laners as well. Like I could see this even being good on Sin since it has an ability power ratio. So we'll see. I think overall decent item. Abyssal Mass now has a much lower radius. Oh, it's a center to center radius though. Still like much lower, but it has a 5% increase. So like this is a really good item. I think what they wanted to do is they wanted to make it to where ranged champions can't build Abyssal Mass like Swain. I know like even Azir's have been going Abyssal Mass and they'll just win the matchup. So I think they really hate ranged champions building this item. So they're gonna make it to where ranged champions can't build the item anymore. And now also like it's even stronger on the melee champions. So I think overall this is definitely a buff to melee champions, and of course like you can't build on ranged champions anymore, which is pretty nice. So I think overall this is a buff to the item on tanks, and obviously like no ranged champions are going to build this item anymore. Seraph's Embrace got nerfed on the shield. That's good because that is broken. And the shield duration is also shortened, so this is a nerf to like Rise and Cassio and all that shit. Dead Man's Plate proc is now magic instead of physical. Interesting. User no longer loses stacks while slowed. Now consumes all momentum on basic attacks, even if less than max stacks, dealing 1 damage per momentum consumed. Salt Lane triggers at max stacks, unchanged. Basic attack now locks out momentum. I still don't like Dead Man's Plate as an item. I'd rather get random wins every single time, so this doesn't do anything. Big change on this patch is the Ginsu's change, so now it has less attack damage, costs less gold, gives less ability power. The magic on hit got dropped down by 1/3 to like 5 instead of 15. Now it does physical damage on hit. The ability power per stack is now percentage based, and it's also attack speed. Oh, it's total attack speed. So this is like, you don't get 3 of flat damage either. You get bonus. This basically is like changing the item where it's not a 1-item wonder. You actually need items to back up the Rage Blade now. So you get at half stacks, melee champions next base attack fully stacks Rage Blade. So this is definitely a buff to melee champions, but I'm not really sure what melee champion you'd even get this on. I think this is a big buff to Jax, actually. I could definitely see this item being good on Jax at some point, but I don't really know what other melee champions you'd even build this on. Can't really think of it. Master Yi? I guess maybe Master Yi. Maybe Aatrox. I could see it. I don't know. This is a weird item. I'm not really sure where to put this item. Definitely a nerf to Kog'Maw and Varus, though, so I think Kog'Maw and Varus will get hit really hard by this change, so I'm not really sure what they're going to do. And then Hextech GLP got 200 gold change in combined costs. This is a good buff to like Aurelion Soul and stuff. Not that many champions use this item. Static Shiv also now proc damage is 20 lower, no longer deals bonus damage to minions. Well, that's actually a pretty big nerf to the wave clear on the item. Zen. I don't know if I build no Rage Blade on Zen. Rapid Fire got buffed though to 20. These are kind of irrelevant changes, but this definitely hurts like the Shiv wave clear. Like I know I've seen Tristan as like one-shot entire creep waves with Shiv because of the bonus damage. So this definitely hurts ADC's wave clear in the late game. Ignite does 100 more damage. Wow. Heal and Teleport have been outclassing Ignite mid lane, especially in pro play. To increase the varsity summoner play, we're pushing a bit more power to Ignite. That's a pretty big buff, actually. That's a lot of damage. Maybe you'll see a bit more Ignite mid laners. I definitely see some Ignite bot laners. I think Ignite will overshadow Exhaust in many cases because of this buff. And then Heal has a longer cooldown as well. Yes. And then they had the new Keystone, the Conqueror. Pretty much TLDR, if you stay in combat with the Tryndamere for 4 seconds, you will die. So basically, after 4 seconds in combat, your first attack against an enemy champion grants you 10 to 35 attack damage, which is quite decent, based on your level, for 3 seconds, and converts 20% of your damage to champions to true damage. And then damaging enemy champions refreshes this buff as well. So that's a lot of fucking damage. And tanks will just like insta-die against this ability. I think it's going to be really good on Gnar and shit like that. And pretty much all the melee champions. And this is just, I think this Keystone's going to be super fucking strong. So yeah. Have fun. And then bone plating got nerfed. Because of course everybody goes bone plating. And pretty much just bone plating and the healing thing. I can't remember what it's called. Chrysalis, new resolve rune in the resistance row. Many champions, blah blah blah, start the game with an additional 60 health. When you get 4 takedowns, consume that health to gain an adaptive bonus of 9 attack damage. That's interesting. So pretty much, it takes away the health and gives you AD. I mean, I guess. I'm indifferent on this. Like, it's okay, I guess. It's aight. It's aight. I don't know. Remove Iron Skin and Mirror Shell. That's fine. I thought those were useless anyways. Yeah. I think these are useless. Rune selection upgrades, and then Twisted Tree Line. Nobody plays that map. And that's pretty much the end of the pat rundown. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Renekton? Yeah, maybe.